This is the Instant Speed Podcast, episode 24. I guess this is the Jack Bauer episode. Our guest today will be none other than Mr. Drew Cordell. But before we get to that, well, friends, I got to tell you that this episode is brought to you by FABDB.net, your premier source for deck building tools, collection management, and simulated booster drafting. Upgrade your account. Go to FABDB.net. Get access to all those cool features. Bring your game to the next level at FABDB.net. All right, we got the facts, ladies and gentlemen. And the number one thing of note, I guess, is the fact that, hey, ProQuest season is donezo. Lots of gold foils have been given out, including to yours truly, if I may say so. And it has been a wonderful experience. Lots of awesome competition out there, lots of Starvos, but still, it was amazing to see everybody out there competing. Flesh and Blood is thriving. It is good to see people out there slinging cards when it matters most. And with ProQuest season done, we can now focus on the next major event, which is the Calling in Indianapolis. That is going on March 18th to the 20th. Yeah, this week, friends, this absolute week. I will be there. If you see me there, come give me a high five, and I'll give you a little prize. I mean, it's not something special, but it's still damn cool, and I want to see you. And besides that, I got another announcement here, and it is the fact that Flesh and Blood has paired up with Dragon Shield to have their artwork, LSS's artwork, Flesh and Blood artwork on Dragon Shields. Now, the information associated with this is essentially the fact that there will be 4, and I quote, iconic Flesh and Blood heroes that will be portrayed on the sleeves. So some of that artwork, I don't know if it's the heroes themselves. I don't know if it's artwork associated to those heroes. Who knows, but it's going to be awesome. I want to hear what your guesses are as to what those heroes will be. I have my 4 guesses, but please let me know what you think that will be. And those will be available on April 22nd. So in about a month and a couple weeks, we'll have access to those sweet, sweet sleeves. But friends, it is time to speak to our first guest. That would be Drew Cordell, right after these messages from FABDB.net. All right, we can all breathe now. ProQuest is over. All the Starvos are in a deep slumber. So it's time to get back to work, friends. Bust out those fun decks, the Katsus, the Azaleas, dare I say, the Levias. Yes, go to FABDB.net, upgrade your account to premium, have access to all the wicked cool deck building tools, the resources, collection management. Get a real hook on your collection and get all the stats you need for your deck. Upgrade that account to premium. I promise you, you will not regret it. Lots going on there. Booster drafting, simulated boosters, the whole 9 yards. Go check it out. FABDB.net, your premier source for deck building tools and all your Fab resources. The Instant Speed Podcast welcomes one of the premier scribes in the Flesh and Blood community. Yes, his articles can be read across various different websites, including fabtcg.com. Welcome to the show, Mr. Drew Cordell. How are you, Drew?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm doing great. It was a busy few weeks of ProQuest and things like that, but things are kind of calming down, or are they? Because there's the Calling Indianapolis that's going on, so plenty of things going on in the grander scheme of Flesh and Blood. But we're here to talk to you, Drew, and what's going on in your life. But before we get to that, we do have the ritual, the origin story of Drew Cordell, of how you got into cards and all that, but more so how you got to where you are today in concerning Flesh and Blood and being a writer for Flesh and Blood and being, immersed in that community. So walk us through a little bit of that origin story of Drew Cordell.
Definitely. Yeah, I've been playing card games in one form or another almost my entire life, starting with Pokemon when I was only 5 or 6, then going to Yu-Gi-Oh! Really switched over to Magic the Gathering about the time I hit high school. I played at casually competitive levels for over a decade there and was also a legend player and coach in Hearthstone back in the day too. So I really discovered Flesh and Blood around when COVID hit. Saw some things around the game when it was going live at first. I wasn't super interested, but with everything happening and not being able to play Magic anymore, I got more and more interested. And Saw some videos on how to play from Noxious, one of the creators that I'd followed a lot in my Hearthstone days, and it looked really cool. So I bought a box and a couple of Blitz decks, and really the rest is history.
Yeah, that's usually how it goes, right? It's just that first taste, and then you're hooked, And what's fascinating is another Pokemon into Yu-Gi-Oh, into Magic kind of trek all the way to Flesh and Blood. No one ever says like Lord of the Rings or Star Wars CCG from back in the day. I'm still waiting to have one of those people on. I know they're out there, but ultimately you have essentially led yourself up to where you are today, which is writing a lot of articles for Flesh and Blood, most prominently right now for FABTCG.com. So where did the writing element in your career take off? Where did that spark first, flicker for you, that writing was essentially your calling when it came to content for Flesh and Blood?
Definitely. Yeah, I've been doing freelance writing actually since my senior year of high school in one form or another. I've worked with over 30 clients over the years. I've done a ton of content outside of that, really just found a passion for writing. And it was pretty easy to transition that over into Flesh and Blood once I really got my hands on the game and starting to understand it. In general, I write very quickly. I can write clean copy pretty fast. So it definitely helps when I'm creating content just to kind of have that skill set and all the experience outside of the game to lean on there.
Yeah, being able to sort of put thoughts into words is a much more difficult skill, I believe, that a lot of people think, because everything in your mind makes sense. It's this giant maelstrom of ideas that are constantly just rubbing up against each other, but when it comes to actually translating it into something that somebody can cleanly consume, it's not easy. And I do envy you the fact that you can write clean copy just like that. Just, few edits, jam it down, and it's good to go. And, your writing style, that's something that's obviously developed over time. Most people's first introduction to writing oftentimes is just, writing essays in school, or being essentially forced to spew ideas and put them together piecemeal to have someone essentially judge and evaluate. But style is something that's developed over time, through your own experience and your own personality that essentially translates to words on paper. Could you just describe a little bit about what your style would be?
Yeah, for sure. And really, in everything I write, I'm very intentful of trying to do some of the same things across any article. I write a lot for various audiences. Like, for example, I have content for people who have never even seen or touched Flesh and Blood. I have content for people who are new to the game and they want to learn more about the mechanics and how to get better, just with that baseline understanding. And then from there, I really write some of the more in-depth strategy pieces, and then some of the pro-level content, which really takes a deep and theoretical look into the game itself, and then how certain cards and interactions work. But in every article that I write, I try to make it fun and engaging, and for there to be some takeaway for any level of player. So even if a beginner is picking up one of my articles geared toward pro players, while they may not understand all the nuances of that, there's going to be some value and they're going to have some takeaways regardless. So in my style, I'm really trying to do all of those things in every article. Just write something that's fun to read, it's easy to read, and at the end of the day, it provides a lot of value for my readers.
Yeah, having that essential, that, that quality that would someone describe as like a page turner, right? Something that you can hook onto your reader, but also having a personality that can be seen and that radiates through your writing. Because myself, I do write as well, but at the same time, I feel like I'm oftentimes just best, how do I say it? I'm best expressed through just speaking. It gives me a lot of freedom to go, and writing oftentimes seems a little bit, not necessarily like a chore, but it's tough because it's an extra little conduit, that a little bridge that you have to build between your thoughts, your ideas, to being able to express them and piece them together to make a coherent sentence. And oftentimes, sometimes I just don't have that. Those neurons are not connecting. They're not firing off the way I want to. And you mentioned your style, that you're trying to be engaging. You're trying to have people, have them hooked to a degree, but also be able to appeal to a vast demographic, the beginners, the experts, the intermediaries, those types of players. Have you found it difficult to shift gears to a degree, to say that, this is an article that's geared towards beginners, this is an article that's geared towards, more advanced players? Is it harder to tailor your style to fit those parameters, or is it more so that your style is essentially universal and the content itself is what people are really digging into?
Yeah, it's really the latter there, and that my style is going to be kind of universal, and then whoever's digging into it will be able to really connect with that and just experience the article. But I know exactly what you're talking about because it's the same thing happens to me every time I try to either do a podcast or a video. It's just not as intuitive for me as writing. It's just that's writing is just something that really clicks for me. I'm able to create content, get my ideas down on paper, things like that. But if I'm making a video, for example, for my YouTube, then it's kind of an uphill battle in a way that's not, it wouldn't be if I was just writing an article, if that makes sense.
No, that definitely makes sense. And oftentimes, like the way that I describe it to some, it's like writing is almost like juggling. Like, it's a skill that you develop and you get with experience. But ultimately, at the end of the day, sometimes it just feels natural. You just pick up something and you can juggle three balls together, and it feels like it feels natural. It's no big deal. Whereas, like any other skill or talent, you need to be able to develop it. You need to make it that way. And for you to be able to say that, like this is just natural to me. It's like it's like riding a bike to a degree, but that I'm sure that that's not how it began. Your progression to being more natural with your writing style. Was there any writing that you did prior to writing for card games? You mentioned that you were writing in high school, etc. What were you writing in high school? Was it fiction? Was it the school newspaper? I've done all of that, and it was always good for developing not just a portfolio and just sort of sharpening your skills, but it was also fun for me at the time to express myself. But what were those building blocks for you to develop that skill set?
Definitely. And I actually had kind of a uphill battle. Like I actually have dysgraphia, which for anyone not familiar, it's kind of like the opposite of dyslexia, but for writing. So it's when I was a kid, I really struggled with just conveying the ideas in my head, putting them down on paper. Like it's just physically was very challenging. And so really when I discovered that I could actually type really well, that's when I started to love writing. My handwriting to this day is still atrocious because of that. But when I learned I could type things, I could put my ideas down like that. It just clicked for me. And really, what I got my start in was actually Bitcoin back in 2013. So I did a lot of freelance writing for some of the Bitcoin news sites in the day and wrote content around that. Unfortunately, spent all my Bitcoin before the big skyrocket there.
I was going to say, are you quietly sitting on this like millionaire treasure trove of like a few Bitcoins or whatever? But what I have to ask, I like, you don't have to tell me this. I want to know when you got in and when you got out.
Yeah, I started probably late 2012, and then I spent most of what I had by 2015. So really, when I was working for these sites, I did it in college, and rather than work a job when I was pursuing my degree, I'd just show up to campus an hour or so early, jam for 30 minutes, write an article, and then make $30, $40. And it's like rather than do however many hours at like a minimum wage job, I just write one article. It was fun, get some money to spend, and go hang out with friends, things like that, and also just kind of develop my craft like that.
All of these things kind of add up, and that's where you are today. Again, like any skill, it's something that you develop and that you refine over time. I know that in my drawer, like right next to me right here, I have at least 2 or 3 abandoned scripts and comic book scripts. But for those listening, if you do Google my name, there is a small piece of published fiction that I am not very proud of that I wish I had spent a little bit more time on. Don't do it. Don't waste your time, friends. Don't give Amazon any money. Nonetheless, friends, so that's great, Drew, and it's awesome. And now you're basically writing for fabtcg.com, which essentially is kind of the pinnacle. When you get that knock on the door, that tap on the shoulder to say, "Hey, we want your ideas on paper for us." How did that occur? Can you walk us through a little bit about how you came to be writing specifically for fabtcg.com?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd really been doing a ton of writing for both Rate Times and Channel Fireball. I spent almost a year just developing my catalog, and I said, well, look, I really love doing this. How can I grow and scale this? So long ago, like around when I'd first started writing, I submitted my content creator program application on fabtcg.com. I submitted it way too early before I'd really written anything. And then quickly learned that you're not able to edit that application once you send it in. It's a yeah, it's a one-time thing. Once you do it, it's sent away and you don't know if you're going to hear anything. So I really thought, well, now that I've got all this experience, I've written all these articles, I've built up my audience and really just have this pretty massive body of work. I thought I would reach out directly. So I sent a message on Facebook to their official page, got connected, and they sent me over to the media team to discuss it. And from there, we just had a conversation, and I really kind of framed it up as, well, what can I do to help provide value to the community? How can I take my skill set, all this content I've developed, how can I make something directly for the website to help get players excited about the game, what's coming up in the competitive seasons, anything going on? And that was really kind of the origin of the project I have going on now, where I'm writing all the content for the ProQuest season over those 5 articles. So is just really, I was able to lean on all the hard work that I've done. And I actually found out that many of the employees at Legend Story Studios have been following my work pretty closely, and they were very familiar with my content. So that certainly helped me land that opportunity there.
I've noticed that the people at LSS are it's like a different approach that, I mean, I've been working with, video games, card games for many years, and I've tried in many ways, shapes, or forms to get connected with, different developer teams or the company itself. And I found that oftentimes there's a lot of pitfalls and there's a lot of not necessarily the mindset of, what have you done for me lately, so to speak. Like, we get it, you play the game and you do this, but like, what can you bring to the table? And I've noticed with LSS that they pay attention and they know what's going on. And like you mentioned, I too, I get what you feel, because when you mentioned it, I completely remembered that there was a FAB, like, content creator program that you can apply to. I completely forgot about what that was, because I'm pretty sure I applied to it like a year ago, before the podcast, had much traction, before I was really involved in the community, before I had to cast it in events or anything like that. It was just, I'm going to do it. I'm creating content. Let's see what happens. And what's fascinating to me is that they pay attention. And that's one thing that I have to give much credit to, is that every interaction I've had with LSS has been, they know what's going on. Their fingers on the pulse. They have, they get the newsletter, so to speak. They're up to speed. Can you talk a little bit more about how that interaction with LSS occurred, and just, your dynamic with them, and how you evaluate LSS's involvement with the community? Because you yourself are a voice for the community, but you're also a voice to the community. So to that degree, LSS sees you kind of as a resource for them to enhance the community, like you mentioned, but that you're also a little bit of a barometer for what the community sentiment is as well. I mean, your articles must be there to reflect and address community concerns, right? So how does LSS kind of interact with you as a writer? And can you just talk a little bit more about that bridge between content creator and LSS?
Yeah, definitely. And it really has been a kind of a back and forth relationship on the work itself. Really been able to provide perspectives on some of their ideas, workshop it with them directly, and then figure out what the content's going to look like. So for this Pro Series specifically, they definitely wanted to get players excited about ProQuest, help inform them what it's going to be all about. And then really, one of the biggest points that we worked on for this series was that ProQuest is really for everyone. It can be very intimidating to play a card game tournament for the first time in some kind of environment like this if you've never done it. Myself, even as someone who's been to numerous Grand Prix, huge events for Magic the Gathering over the years, with kind of the 2-year hiatus with COVID, I found when I went to the calling in Dallas Fort Worth, despite having just been to so many events like this and gotten over the nerves years ago, that I was feeling that same thing again, just being at a big card event after so long. And it can be really scary. So really part of the series was geared around that, helping demystify the experience for new players, give them some tips and tricks on what to expect, how to prepare for these types of events, as well as just have fun at them ultimately. And then from there, we really just dove into some aligning some of the strategy that I've done for a lot of the content elsewhere. We looked at some of the top performing decks, what it takes to build one, what the top heroes were. So really, they gave me a lot of creative freedom around just writing about what my perception of the Everfest meta, kind of what's happening with the new cards and the heroes getting all these upgrades, and from there just crafted the article series alongside them. So it's been just a really cool experience getting to work so closely with them and figuring out what content's going to resonate most for the readers and players.
Oh, then that's that in itself is a service to the community and people consuming that content, because people want to know, and that has essentially led you to your next big project, which you had announced very recently, that you're building upon, and it's going to be an ongoing series. It's essentially your masterclass series that you've introduced. Talk to us a little bit about what the masterclass series is and the mission of the masterclass series. What is the objective of this program?
Definitely. Yeah, so this is, it's called Champion University. It's something I'm launching through my Patreon for the highest support tier. Really, I kind of looked at this as there's not a great way to really connect with a lot of the top players in the game on a more personal basis. A lot of them will create content for YouTube, but at the end of the day, you're watching a video. So I really wanted to create something that's more similar to like an actual master class, or you're sitting in a lecture hall, you're learning from players, and then you have the opportunity to ask questions in real time and really just take kind of your understanding of the topic that they want to present on to the next level. And kind of when I started this selfishly, there's a lot of players I really admire, and I thought, well, it'd be really cool if I could just sit down and pick their brain on some certain topics that could help me improve as a competitive player. And then I realized that I could expand that to my Patreon. I could provide a ton of value for my supporters and build a program that over time there's just going to be this massive body of knowledge for people who may have not been able to attend the class in person, but then they could access the recordings there and then any of the future classes in person from there.
So your guests so far that you've announced, one of them I'm very familiar with, because he's basically one of my teachers, as it were, somebody who has taught me a lot about the game and how to compete and how to grind. Is Dalen Mack, good friend of mine, great individual, and probably one of the best card players for Flesh and Blood that's out there right now. What specifically is you're bringing on different guests, so I would imagine that the topics that you're going to be covered are going to be varied and basically tailored and paired to these guests that you're bringing in. Their areas of expertise. I want to know specifically about Dalen Mack and what Dalen's class or his subject matter is going to be.
Yeah, so Dalen's awesome. I'm super excited to have him as part of the program. We haven't locked down his concept yet for what the lecture is going to be about. We're probably going to be looking at doing that toward the end of this month, but really for any guest lecturer that I bring on, I'm going to be working with them directly, essentially on all the content that they want to do. We'll make sure it's not too close to anything done before, but that they're really able to express themselves as an individual and player and just have creative control over the process. So really, they're going to be creating their entire lectures things they're passionate about, that they've learned about from playing the game and have experienced themselves. And then from there, I'm going to be helping them just shape that content into a visual format. And then, of course, being with them every step of the way through the master class itself when they give that lecture. But super excited to have Dalen on, and I will definitely let you know once I know what he's going to be talking about.
Oh, damn right, because I'm going to be there to basically critique the hell out of that one. But for those listening, honestly, Drew locked down like a real warrior when it comes to competitive card gaming, and I am a product of his instruction to the degree of practicing, playing, and using his instruction and his training, as it were. Of the 5 ProQuests that I attended, I top 8'd 3, and I've got 1 gold foil to my name. So that is a great. I'm trying to pump his tires here without giving him too much of an ego. So he's going to listen to this and just kind of be like, yeah, damn right I did. So this is definitely a reason why everybody should check out the masterclass, the champion university that Drew's putting together here, because I can attest to the fact that the level of content that is going to be added to there, at least from just Dalen's perspective, or what Dalen's bringing to the table, is incredibly valuable. It is absolutely incredibly valuable. And like you're talking about, not everyone is going to have access to test groups that include that level of player. So is there appeal for this Champions University? Is it more so for the beginner? Is it more so for the good player who doesn't have the access to the same resources everyone does? Where is the what's the entry fee from a perspective of what you need to, the level of player you need to be to get, value out of these Champion University courses?
Yeah, so this is really designed with one type of player in mind, and that's really anyone who wants to get better at the game competitively. So it really doesn't matter if you're a beginner, you're an intermediate player, or a high-level player. I think there's really going to be something for everybody here. It's just really geared toward those players who want to get more involved with the competitive side of the game, have aspirations to play more competitively outside of things just like armories on a weekly basis. So in all the lectures, just like I do with my writing, we do want to design these to make sure they're approachable for everybody, and that regardless of your level of skill, that you're going to be able to take something away from each of these, and it's going to be a very valuable resource.
And so far, so good. I mean, again, like I said, I am proof positive that the concepts work. So hopefully Dalen can go ahead and maybe not give away as many secrets as it takes to improve. But I like that. The fact that you've basically painted with a broad enough stroke to include all walks of life from the different levels of their skill set. In reality, the appeal is to those who want to improve, and some people are good but stubborn and don't want to improve, and they might not have interest in this. So I like that there's a broad enough stroke to include so many people, but in reality, sometimes there's just that mental block that people just can't bust through. And stubbornness is a thing. Saltiness can get you through to a point where you just don't care enough, that you think that you cannot improve. So for those who want to improve, this is definitely something that they'll want to check out for sure. And you've already locked down Dalen. Can you talk about who else is already locked down, who's in talks, what other guests we can expect down the line?
Definitely. So for the first one in March here, I'm actually going to be leading that myself. I'm going to be talking about how to win a bad matchup. It's really a concept and topic a lot of players are mindful of, especially when trying to pick out a deck to play at events. And then in April, managed to lock in Max Thomas as well, who also goes by Saint Nothing. Max is a player I've admired since my earliest days in Flesh and Blood, just very bright, strong, competitive player, and someone who's just good at the game. And really for his lecture, we're going to be looking at, he wants to talk about the subtle impacts of making a misplay, as well as how to win a game when you fall behind. So really, I'm super excited for that lecture. And then going forward, in talks with multiple other players, I don't want to say anything yet until I've managed to lock those down of who those players are, but really looking at some of the strongest players of the game to get them onto this program. And of course, anyone who comes on as a guest lecturer is compensated as well. So trying to make it as rewarding as possible, get some great folks out to the show that's going to provide a lot of value for the patrons there.
So you basically just ruled me out. The best players in the world, so no flake. Unless you need a class of how to distract your opponent with Star Wars references. I am for sure in for that. That is, if that ever becomes a thing. Those like the psychological warfare element of sitting across your opponent and distracting them with stupidities and silly noises. Running your mouth 101 is that's the flake course for sure. That sounds great, man, and it's really going to be a very valuable asset to the Flesh and Blood community. And like you said, there's so many people who want to improve. And I had this conversation last episode with Matt Rogers, and we're talking essentially about the fact that Matt said that the field is catching up. The players who were there at the ground level, who had that advantage of not just being familiar with the game earlier than everyone else, but having the time to refine and win those events and have the competitive experience early, everyone else is now basically caught up to the degree where someone like Matt Rogers is not, I wouldn't say worried. Matt is always going to be a good player, But there are people who want to improve. They know that this game is good. They're discovering just the amount of layers that can be peeled back from this to find those margins where you can improve, where you can find that that extra percent of edge in the matchups. And something like this is going to be great. So I think that there's going to be a lot of interest to this degree, and I'm excited to see how this rolls out and who those names are. I mean, that's to me is the most fascinating element because, you know, you yourself, me, myself, like I'm sure you and I can both agree that you and I are neither, you know, we are not the best players in the world, right? So if you want to be able to offer the top tier, it's people like Dalen, it's people like, you know, the other people that you're getting to, that you're talking to, those best players. That's where that information, you know, comes with a certain amount of integrity and reliability. And I am so intrigued. So please keep us posted on that, Drew. But I'm excited. Can you give us a little hint or a little tease maybe as to who you're in negotiation with?
Yeah, maybe talking to a winner of a nationals event from 2021.
Okay.
We might have, so
Okay.
might give you a better idea of the kind of some of the folks I've been talking to.
All right. Well, that does actually, that narrows it down significantly. So if people are paying attention, you can go find out that list and maybe do a little bit of sleuthing yourself. I will leave that as a mystery. For I do not want to go ahead and basically shake that coconut tree too hard. So I'll let you announce when you're ready to announce. But in terms of, you know, we're talking about competition, improving, etc. Competitive season is, I mean, it's squared away from the ProQuest perspective, but there is still a calling that's coming this coming weekend in Indianapolis. After that, there's Battle Hardens, there's more callings, etc., and ultimately culminating to Pro Tour. You mentioned that you've competed at some of these bigger events, albeit, you know, you were in Dallas-Fort Worth for the calling. You've played in Magic Grand Prix. You do have that experience. Do you still hold those same competitive fires? Do they still burn within you, or have you kind of just decided that, you know what, my skill set, my intentions, my ambitions are on the content creator side?
Yeah, I'm definitely a competitive-minded player, and that's really an area of ongoing struggle for me, just trying to find that balance between content creation and playing competitively in events. Because in general, I write 10 plus articles per month in addition to everything I do on my Patreon and managing that. So it definitely eats a lot of time. And I mean, I work a full-time job as well, have a family, and need to balance all of that. So really, I'm trying to definitely play all the competitive events I can. I'm always trying to get better because ultimately that's going to help me create better content. And really this year, one of the goals I've set, I really want to be able to play more classes in the game on a competitive level. I'm kind of known as the Guardian guy, or sometimes people even joke that I'm the Cale McCreath Jr. or light. But yeah, definitely trying to branch out and just be able to play a lot of these other classes and heroes on a more competitive layer or level, and then get out to all the competitive events I can.
But there's so many, and that's what's fascinating. Yeah. And they're not like they don't play the same, and that's what I've really come to notice. It's not like you can, you know, like for instance, you mentioned Hearthstone. It's not like you can really understand the concepts of Hearthstone, pick up one deck, pick up another, and they kind of work that way. It's like, okay, well, it's Priest, it's Control, I know what to do. My win condition is the late game, it's the grind, etc. You know, I'm playing, you know, Warlock Zoo back in the day, and it's just like, all right, just dump your hand, go face, and like, you know, to this, every hero, really, it's not just the cards that are different, it's just the intricacies of how it's meant to be played that are so unique, I find. And every time I pick up a new hero and want to, you know, push my limits to see how far I can go in terms of understanding this hero, I always find that it's a very different experience from where I started with Katsu to going to Briar to Prism to Guardian. Every hero has felt different. It has felt like the end game is different, the mid game is different, the early game is different. It's very rare, I find, that I can really just pick up another deck and play it the same way and have the same results. So have you picked up a hero at like lately that you just either have found is, I don't want to say is beyond you, but I just, like, for me, sometimes like playing Dorinthia, I'm like, I can't do this. Like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I just could not ever grasp that. Do you have that feeling with any other heroes out there that just kind of are either, above your head or just have no interest in grasping that particular side of the gameplay?
Yeah, for me, that's definitely Kano. And this is a hero. I probably have maybe 5 or 6 games of Kano under my belt at all. And it's kind of strange because I know a lot of players who were notorious control players in Magic the Gathering really kind of gravitated toward Kano. And that was really the archetype that I played in Magic almost religiously for the time. But really just that you're doing so many things that are just so complicated, and at the end of the day in this game I'm happy just swinging a hammer.
It's just easy, dude. Pitch blue, go face. Like, that's just the way to go. Obviously there's more intricacies to that, but it just seems to me sometimes that I'm with you with the Kano thing. Like, I've seen Kano matches, I've casted Kano matches. I still don't understand Kano matches. Like, they're just like, I don't get how they can kind of pull a rabbit out of their hat sometimes with a little hocus pocus and steal a win. But it is exciting in itself. I think I'm with you on that one with the Kano thing, man. Like, it's a whole different other layer of, like, you mentioned, like you said, control players just gravitate towards it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I remember when I was like very early on, when I was still introducing players to this game, one of the players that I introduced was Nathan Zamora, aka That's Admirable. And when I was showing him, I was playing Ninja and he was playing something else, and we're just trying stuff out. And he's like, what's the most ridiculous, obscure or very niche hero? I said, it's got to be Kano. So he's like, I'm going to figure this out. And even with all of his expertise and all of his experience, we played it, and he's like, this is bogus. This is ridiculous. Like, this is absolutely fun. Don't get me wrong, but I can see myself going crazy trying to figure this out. And I mean, and ultimately, when that was amongst the chain, amidst the chain meta, like when it was before all the bans and everything, he's like, I'm just gonna play chain. Like, what am I, silly? Like, what am I, stupid? Like, why would I ever want to give up this kind of advantage? If you were to say that there's a hero that you really speaks to you, to your playstyle, what would that be?
It's really at the most fundamental level got to be Oldhim. Just I really like playing the defensive style like that, looking for incremental advantages you can find during the game, protecting your life total, and then ultimately just grinding down your opponent's defenses over time and setting up that really big pivot turn that's going to change the game in your favor. And that's really what a lot of the Guardian heroes outside of maybe Starvo are trying to do. With that more traditional plan. I just really enjoy that kind of play style, always having the options. And in general, you don't have any one matchup in the field that just feels unwinnable or terrible. You have to work harder for the wins in a lot of situations, but you're not going to be punished in certain matchups as much as you might on some other classes that may just have a more difficult time, though their games are easier in general.
Yeah, I think the major enemy to the Oldhim player is the clock and, like, indecisiveness, right? Like, that to me feels like that is oftentimes a skilled Oldhim player can really do well. But at that point, sometimes if your opponent's just humming and hawing about what they want to do and you're just kind of eyeing the clock, you're like, oh no, like, we're not both going down with the ship, so to speak. So that's awesome, Drew. We've got one more segment called Go Again, Drew. I'm hoping that you will be joining us with that.
Absolutely.
Awesome stuff. All right, we are now 24 for 24 of guests joining us for Go Again. I don't think anyone's ever going to even say no. It's part of the agreement prior to this. But we will be right back, ladies and gentlemen, with Go Again right after this BCW Supplies product review. The Instant Speed Podcast is always brought to you by BCW Supplies, and I've got another cool product that I want to show to you. Now, we've already got you the awesome cases and all the cool stuff that we got here, but how about protecting the cards themselves? The deck's well-suited in here, but you need sleeves, my friend, and we've got the Elite 2 gloss sleeves. These are really, really great sleeves. These are the teal ones. These are what I used at the ProQuest this weekend. That's what got me this beautiful gold foil. Now, I'm not saying the sleeves are going to do it, but when it feels good in your hand, sometimes it feels better to play. So let's look at these sleeves right here. Here's the deck we used. Now, this is the glossy ones. These are really, really great, and they feel amazing. I'm just going to go ahead and brush right through these. And you can see there's really no sticking to the, they don't stick together. They really, feel really good in your hand. Now, they are super glossy, so you do have to have a pretty tight grip on these to make sure that they're not going all over the place. But unless you're really one of those erratic gamers that are just all willy-nilly, this is basically a really feel-good kind of sleeve. Now, how about, in terms of clarity? Well, the clarity on the cards comes in pretty good. Now, there is a nice little sheen that you're going to see. Obviously, I've got the lights going off of them, so you're going to see a little bit of glare, but the cards come through crystal clear. And the black backdrop of the sleeve, here's what the sleeve looks like with the card in it. So the back backdrop of the sleeve really makes for a nice framing. There's no white backdrop or other colors, so it really looks like the card is the centerpiece for these sleeves. They feel good, they look crystal clear, but are they durable? Here's a sleeve. We're gonna do a little test right here for you. I'm just gonna take it and I'm gonna try my best. Okay, I don't claim to work out, but I'm not a weak guy, and it took a hell of a lot of effort just to go ahead. Now, the seams of this are still intact. They didn't tear at any of the corners. The weak point was besides my massive muscular biceps, the weak point was the plastic piece over here, but it took a shiatsu load of effort to tear these. These are the Elite 2 gloss sleeves from BCW Supplies. Go to bcwsupplies.com. Use the code ISP10. Get 10% off your order. All your orders, not just the first one, all of them. And don't forget, if you're a Patreon member, a Tier 2 Patreon member, we do monthly giveaways for BCW Supplies. This month, we're giving away this really cool set over here and a set of these sleeves. So if you want to go ahead, support us on patreon.com/InstantSpeedPod, and you might get yourself these. Again, BCW Supplies, use the code ISP10, get 10% off your order. Check them out. You will not regret it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to go wide on Mr. Drew Cordell as we go again on a series of rapid-fire questions. Mr. Drew Cordell, are you ready to go again?
I'm ready.
All right, first action comes through. I love this question because it is such a nice little peer into someone's personality and their private life. But Mr. Drew Cordell, what is your hidden talent?
All right, for me, I'm actually quite a skilled cook and also really enjoy smoking meats and barbecuing. So oftentimes on the weekends, that's what I'm doing. I'm cooking up new meals, new recipe ideas, and really just love entertaining friends and family, having them over to the house and getting outside for a barbecue and have a couple of craft beers.
Oh, dude. Yeah, invite. Whatever, I'm there. It's all good. Dude, like that, you just spoke to me. The best thing ever is just sitting by the barbecue or just being outside with a drink and just waiting for that, like waiting, watching and just discussing. That is the best thing. And living in Canada, we don't get the, many months of the year, but when it happens, oh boy. All right, so if in that case, I have two questions. Number one is,
Sure.
What kind of barbecue do you have? Because I know that oftentimes it's like a point of pride for some people. It's like some people like to show off, nice watch, their car. Barbecuing in itself, a barbecue is sometimes a point of pride for certain cooks. So you got to tell me what kind of barbecue you got.
Definitely. I've got the Traeger Pro Series 575. It's their smallest model, but for anyone not familiar, it's a pellet smoking grill. So powered by electricity, and then it burns these little wood pellets. It's essentially just fine dust of various woods, and it gives a really nice smoke to anything. It's really easy to cook on, not a lot of overhead with maintaining it, and you can change out the pellets with different woods, and it actually significantly changes the flavor of whatever you're cooking. So you can shift that around from recipe to recipe to try to get the flavors you're looking for on the smoke there.
I love it. And how is your steak cooked? That's the other big one.
Medium rare for me. My
Yeah.
wife likes rare, so usually somewhere in between if I'm cooking two at once.
Easy. It means less time before we eat. It's the best. Next question for you is, how do you deal with writer's block?
Yeah, so really, if I'm writing fiction, which I've written 5 full-length science fiction novels as well over the years, I can really get writer's block when it comes to that. And typically, I'll just have to step away for a while and then come back and visit it later. For Flesh and Blood, I really don't find I get writer's block at all. I can typically, once I have an idea for an article, just write it from start to finish. I can't really recall even a single instance of having writer's block when it comes to Flesh and Blood once I have kind of just the idea behind the article, and then I've done any of the work developing the deck list, anything else that was going to be required to write that out.
That works for me. I love it. Next question is this is submitted from @Sigma or DOS, asking, would you ever take Endless Winter out of an Oldhim deck, be it control, tempo, or aggressive?
Yeah, so Endless Winter, I really enjoyed as a card. So anyone not familiar, that's a 4-cost attack. It's a red, blocks for 3, and if you fuse it with an ice card, then for each defending card your opponent adds to the chain, they're going to get a frostbite under their control. And then if it hits any of their activated abilities for things like their armor or weapons, that's going to cost a extra resource on their turn, or it's going to generate a frostbite. Sorry. But yeah, so just a very strong card in general, one that I really love to play. It ends up being kind of different than you'd expect. If you've ever been on the other side of the table of this, especially when it's fused, oftentimes you're incentivized just to take the 8 damage because the frostbite can really start to add up for the defending cards. That's going to track things like your armor blocks. If you defend with cards from your hand or your armor and then try to play a defense reaction, you're actually going to have some of that frostbite in play before you even play the defense reaction. Then you're going to get another frostbite after you play that reaction itself. So just a very punishing card, especially when it's fused. And so this is really one that I'm going to always try to include in Oldhim, given I have enough ice in the deck, which I typically would. But a very strong card and one that I'm always happy to have in my deck.
So, Mr. Drew Cordell, it's we'll say it's 10 p.m. You're at the bar. It's your turn up for karaoke. The song that you submitted to sing is...
Oh man, so I'm a huge metalhead. I've done karaoke maybe once in my life, but I'd probably pick something a little less heavy, maybe something like Enter Sandman by Metallica that, I mean, the crowd will still like, but at the end of the day, I'm having fun too. Provided I've had enough to drink.
Well, that's usually a nice little incentive too, as well. Nothing says courage like 3 or 4 pints before you just jam out some, some. For you, Metallica for sure. For me, surprisingly, Justin Timberlake, great guy, love him. I'll jam that out right after your Enter Sandman. This one coming in from Andrea Biaggi. Asking, if Guardian would not be a class in Flesh and Blood, which class would you play, both for class, appeal, and power level?
Oh, man. So this one, I've actually started to play some Viserai myself. Ever since I really started playing a little bit more Runeblade, I thought, well, it'd be really cool if Guardian could make Rune Chance, but if not, maybe I'll just play some Runeblade on the side. But really just a class that really appeals to me since you're attacking damage or attacking opponents across 2 different accesses of damage. So you've got the physical damage and the arcane split, just very difficult to defend. And especially with Viserai, you could just create a really cool engine, maybe not something as snowbally is what you'd create with Prism, but you can still set up some really cool turns with synergies and just generate a lot of value. So if Guardian wasn't in the game, I'd probably be playing a lot more Runeblade, but I'm very excited to be playing some Viserai this year, both in Blitz and Classic Constructed, and just get a lot more expertise with the class myself.
It's a class that I just cannot grasp. I'm not saying that it's bad or that it's in the same vein that we talk about how certain classes just don't appeal to you. It appeals to me. I just cannot grasp it. So I think it's definitely something I'll have to dig my teeth into more. But Viserai and I just don't mix. Maybe because it's been kicking my ass very significantly over the past few weeks. All right. You said that you've written fiction, you've written articles, you've done a whole lot in terms of your writing repertoire. But what would you say is your favorite piece of writing that you have ever done?
Yeah, if we're talking just overall, probably my first series that I wrote for science fiction. It's called Absolute Knowledge. That's available on Amazon and elsewhere. I've got one more book to write in that series, but Just a really cool and fun one to write. It was my first novel I ever published, and just such a cool experience getting to do that. But if we're talking about Flesh and Blood specifically, that's really going to be my Oldham series that I wrote for Wraith Times. Over 4 parts, I really got to take a deep dive in the class and hero, build it on a blank canvas from the ground up from the very beginnings of the Tales of Aria spoiler season, just really discover and learn how the class worked. And since then, I put in over 100 hours playing Oldham, just know everything about it pretty much at this point until a new set comes out and there's new cards and interactions to understand. But just it was such a cool experience getting to write that series, and just the outreach and support from the community around that was really cool. I had people when I was at the Calling Dallas Fort Worth, back when I even didn't really consider myself to be that big of a writer. I had them come up and recognize me and talk to me about the articles, and it was just such a cool experience getting to write that series and talk to some of my fans about it, and let them know a little bit more about the deck behind the scenes there.
I will say I did read that series. It was part of, I believe, the premium content from Wraith Times. I did read that series leading up to the U.S. Nationals. I was casting that, and I wanted to get a better feel and an understanding for a hero that I didn't really have many reps with, nor did I have the deep understanding that I wanted to have going into that tournament. I wanted to understand from a limited perspective and from a constructed perspective, and that series I did read, and it did give me a lot of extra insight into how that hero is played. So great work there. Seventh question for the Go Again is, you did mention that there are some people you're talking to. Now, without naming names or confirming anybody, if you mention this name, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're yes or no, or you're talking to them or whatever. I just want to know who your ideal number one guest would be for your Champions University series.
Sure. So really looking at just some of the top players. Don't necessarily want to name any player in particular, but just to give you kind of an idea of the profile, certainly looking for players with competitive achievements and really just ultimately a passion for the game and a desire to share some of the knowledge that they've accumulated over their history with the game. Those are really going to be some of the ideal candidates that we're going to try to get on. But I'm also talking directly with my patrons. If they have any players they want to hear from, definitely I'll reach out and start the conversation with some of those players, see if there's interest, if they want to get involved or learn more about it.
All right, last question. You're flying. You're on a plane. Unless you fly, that could have been one of your hidden talents. Who knew? You're on a long haul flight, Drew Cordell. You got to sit between two heroes. Which two heroes do you want to sit between?
Oh, I'm gonna have to pick the two smallest heroes. I'm 6'6" tall, so
Holy
really
crap.
big guy. And typically, if I'm on a long flight, I spend probably half of it just standing by the bathroom because I don't want to sit in my seat. In the past, I've been too frugal to pay for the extra leg room, so really, I'm just looking for the most comfortable flight I can get.
So the two smallest heroes. I mean, I don't know too much of the lore. Like, I don't have their driver's licenses, where you can get all their statistics. But it would be really cool, honestly, if LSS released sort of baseball card style cards for the heroes where you've got the stats in the back and stuff like that, their birthday, their age, their height, their weight, all that stuff. That would be kind of sweet. Just having a Reinar card. It's Reinar, 7'3", swings club left-handed, all that kind of cool stuff.
Yeah.
So who are the two smallest ones then?
I don't know.
I feel like Katsu's kind of small, nimble, ninja.
Yeah, maybe Benji, Dash.
Yeah, that makes sense. Plus, Dash would kind of probably show up with some cool contraptions. If anybody's on the plane with a Nintendo Switch, it's going to be Dash. For sure. Well, Mr. Drew Cordell, I sincerely appreciate you being on the show, my friend. It has been a pleasure to talk to you, and I wish you success with this Champion University series that you're... when is that coming out? When is that being launched?
Yeah, so it's going to be a monthly initiative. I'm going to have one every single month on my Patreon. The first one is going to be on March 26th on my Discord. It's available to Patreon supporters.
Nice. Well, that is coming up soon. So like you mentioned, you do have a Discord. Obviously, you're on Twitter, and you can find your articles all over the place. But please, for those who don't want to do the legwork, tell us where we can find more Drew Cordell. Connect with Drew Cordell.
Yeah, really, my Twitter's going to be the best resource, and I'll provide that link so we can put it in the notes. But it's just going to be Twitter. It's Drew, my name, DREWJ Cordell, CORDELL. And from there, I've got my link tree as my set link there, and that's got everything you could ever need if you want to access any of my content, Patreon, any of my social media, and things like that. It's all there.
Well, I can say this, and that every interaction I've had with you has always been pleasant. It's been great. I know that you and I have never met in person, but we've talked a lot, and it has always been a great experience. And just really, you're just a good dude, man. And and I really, really appreciate you being on the show. And thank you so much again, man.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's been a real treat being on the show. I appreciate it.
It's all good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Instant Speed Podcast. Again, brought to you by FABDB.net and BCW Supplies. Big, huge thank you to our patrons. Don't forget, you can check out our Patreon. If you hit that top tier level, we do have BCW giveaways for you guys. Otherwise, hey, we love you so much. So cheers to you guys. Don't forget, you are not losing if you're learning, so keep playing the game. You might win. We'll see you next week on the Instant Speed Podcast.
Well,